So I am Anna Gilchrist. I am the children's author slash founder of Sandfish Publishing, my publishing company. I started writing children's books as a response to some information that I received as one who was learning about children's rights. I was actually studying children's development, childhood studies in Wales, in the UK, and getting my master's there. And I went there simply because of the fact that they focused on children's rights, which I had discovered, or just through working with children and through various observations and studies, that it seems there is a very reactive way of dealing with children rather than actually focusing on what their human rights are. And I felt that there needed to be a stronger focus on that and see how I could involve myself in that way or engage myself in that way. So I went abroad, went ahead and studied that, and I discovered that the United States did sign what's called the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is a document, a human rights document, one of the most, I would say, most popular, or it was actually one of the human rights treaties that had the most nations agreed to sign than any other human rights treaty. So it's extremely popular, it's well known. However, when it comes to ratifying it, the United States is the only country in the world that has not ratified this document. So I was dumbfounded by that. And so I said, okay, how can I find a way to kind of be a catalyst in making this a priority? And so while I was working on my dissertation there, I, for some reason, had this idea of a children's book. I just came up with this story about a girl named Daffodil who helps a friend who is coping with feeling rejected on the playground because she's different. And we focused a lot during that time of during my studies on the right for children to play, because over there they actually want to make sure that it's included as part of the curriculum for children in schools. And because of the studies that have demonstrated how play is essential for children in their learning and in their social development and their cognitive development. So it just has so many benefits, and so it's extremely important. So I wanted to focus on that particular article, which is Article 31 in the convention, and put that in a children's book. So that's what I did. And of course, I wanted to make sure it was diverse because unfortunately we have problems with diversity in children's books, and coming more and more so, unfortunately, with the bans of books. But I don't want to digress. So I wanted to make sure that was a priority, to make sure she was a brown girl like me and was going out and helping a friend and resolving an issue that was happening in her local playground and demonstrating leadership in that way. So that's how I came across that. And yeah, been working on the series since.
Wow. And so if I remember right, you had always, I mean, to go back to when you were younger, you had always had an interest in writing.
Yeah.
Right? And didn't you start writing when you were very
Yes,
young?
it was kind of an accident. But I liked to write songs when I was 8, but the whole writing a story, that was something that I didn't realize that I enjoyed until 4th grade. My 4th grade teacher, Miss Purdy, wherever she is, she was a huge inspiration, and she was always on top of me about something because I had just moved. My parents had unfortunately divorced, and we were in a whole new environment. It was very nerve-wracking for me and even caused a lot of anxiety. So my experience was trying to make friends, right? So I was trying to do all the things that my friends were doing, reading the books that they were reading. But my teacher noticed that I was pretty advanced with my reading and my writing. And she was like, you don't have to read the books they're reading. You don't have to, do the things that they're doing because you're different. You have a special skill. And I was like, okay, whatever. So we had this project later on in the year where we were studying the ecosystem. Specifically, our class was focusing on the desert. And so the project was for us to do research on a desert animal, anywhere in the desert in the world, any desert. And you could either do a picture book where you basically draw pictures and write a sentence about the animal, and you could do that, or you could write a story involving the desert animal. Well, I knew I didn't want to do the picture book. I thought it was boring. Nonfiction book, blah. So I decided I wanted to write an actual story, but I was not anticipating that the story would be 5 chapters long. I ended up writing a
Oh my
five
God.
chapter.
I bet your teacher wasn't
I
anticipating
don't,
that.
to be honest, I think, well, she had a very calm, very soft nature. She didn't get very excited, but she had the biggest smile on her face when I
Right,
turned that project in. I had written it on ruled paper, and I had drawn illustration, which was just
right.
like the cover of the book. I had like done the whole thing, and she was just she was very pleased. She was like, "I knew you could do it. Very good
Oh,
job. I knew you could do it." And I was just like,
I love that story about a teacher being such an inspiration and really being able to bring out the best
absolutely.
in
Teachers are
children.
important. Teachers.
I I have to ask, I have to ask though, what was the
Oh, it
animal?
was the sandfish. So that's why
Oh, oh,
that's why I
interesting.
named my publishing
Oh, I love
company
that.
after the sandfish, because that's what began the whole journey. And so I never forgot that. So yeah, that was it.
Well, so then to fast forward and you became interested in children's rights. How did you really get interested in that? You said it was when you were studying childhood development. Um, is that kind of an issue? Do you think that kind of linked to other interests that you had had, or what was it that really grabbed your attention and that made you so passionate about this?
I think it was based on my own observations, having worked with children in the past, and things that I've read, just noticing that things are very reactive. It's about how do we
Mhm.
take care of the child after the fact, and what
Right.
um, in what way do we just provide for the child without considering the rights of the child as an individual? I saw that that was lacking in our approach to certain programs, and it's just like, okay, we got to make sure they're disciplined, we got to make sure that they're behaving well, but not understanding how that works, and to understand that every child has certain needs that need to be addressed, and they as an individual have certain ways that they need to cope with what those needs are in order to address them.
Mhm.
So that's where I decided to kind of focus more on that, because I was noticing that. I was noticing the lack of that happening. And I was able to, through my work, be able to connect with children and engage in children in ways that other people were having trouble doing. So, and it was noticeable. People
Mhm.
were noticing. I was working in after school program in Harlem, and I was promoted very quickly
Mhm.
because they noticed that I was able to engage with the children and develop relationships with the children, because I respected them as individuals, and their behavior changed. It transformed. Kids that they labeled as bad or
Mhm.
misbehaved were no longer misbehaving, because I was
Mhm.
able to grasp what their individual needs were. And so I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And when I discovered about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, I said that I would go and focus on that a little bit more and see what I can learn from it. And that's when it happened to be discovered that I also that the United States clearly was not doing their part in making sure that we are acknowledging these rights. So yeah, that's how that came.
Mhm. How did you, I mean, you kind of touched on this already, but can you talk a little bit more about how you came up with the idea of the series of this girl and her friend and how that was how you came up with the idea to have that as the vehicle to really teach people, really to teach kids about their rights?
Yes, well, I felt like one, it has to be applicable to their own lives, right? I felt like, because there are books out there that are talking about children's rights, and basically they list the rights, like Article 1 is, Article 2. But I wanted to go a little deeper. I wanted to create a series that applies these rights to their everyday life. So, like I said, with the first one, The Extraordinary Day of Daffodil Gray, she focuses on the right for children to play, like the right for, and so she makes sure that her new friend that she discovers, is able to play on the playground where she wanted to play. And so I wanted to demonstrate that in ways that children could understand, and so that it could be applied to their own life, but also enjoy
Right.
the story as a whole. So it's just a matter of finding a way to do that. And I felt like it was important to do it as a series because I, of course, I can't put all the articles in one book. It's like, well, this part of the story is, based on this article. No, absolutely not. So it made sense to focus on at least one, two, maybe even three articles, depending on the story, to address those particular
Mhm.
rights and still have it apply in a story that children can relate to. So, for instance, my second book, Daffodil Gray and the Colorful Parade, it focuses on two articles, Article 13 and 15, which allows children to express themselves as well as to associate with their peers. So, respectively. So it's very important to be able to focus on those articles without saying, okay, this is Article 15 and da da. It's just having the
Right.
story there to basically
Mhm.
explain what these articles mean and how they apply to your life or apply to any child's life.
Right, and I love that she really models how you can embody these qualities and also the leadership qualities, which I know is also something that's really important to you. You say that you want to educate and empower young people to be tomorrow's ethical and compassionate leaders. So how does Daffodil model that kind of leadership, and what do you hope young people take away when they're reading these stories about, like you said, how they can apply it to their own lives?
Yes, my reasoning behind that is to encourage children to take on something that they see needs to be changed or to speak up. And that's what Daffodil does.
Mhm.
She literally goes and she sees something, she
Mhm.
realizes this is not right. Let me go and step in and see what I can do because she's hurt and I don't like the fact that she's hurt and I don't like what's happening here. So let me go ahead and fix it. And it shows and it demonstrates it can be the small things. It doesn't have to be some major action that you do. It's just the small things that can make a difference. And so that's what I want to demonstrate or tried to demonstrate through my book is that leadership is not necessarily some grandiose performance or, some grandiose gesture. It's just simply doing something that you feel is right, the right thing to do. And to help other people. When you see something, if somebody clearly needs help, don't be afraid to just step in and help. It's okay. And it doesn't have to be, something, big or grandiose, as I mentioned before. So that's how I'm demonstrating that. And of course, it's in a story, so it's easy to see and apply to your own life because it's like, oh, yeah, Daffodil did this. Of course, I'm gonna do that. Uh, so yeah, that's how I want to
Right.
demonstrate leadership, and that's what I want to do with Daffodil. She's just a normal girl. She's a normal girl who just notices her world, and then says, you know what, I want to do something about this.
I love that because I think, speaking as a parent, I think we have a tendency to, children are very idealistic and they have that drive. They, like you say, they see what needs to be changed and they want to do something. And as parents, a lot of times, and maybe educators too, we tend to kind of try and taming that down either because we don't want to do it, like we're scared, like oh, I don't have time today. I have a son that he wants to, every time we pass anybody who has a sign like they're homeless and I'm just in a hurry, I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll come back tomorrow. He's like, no, we need to stop. I'll give them my lunch. And I was like, no, I don't want you to give them your lunch. Why am I
Mhm.
stopping him? He really feels that like he really wants to do this. But I think, I don't know what it is, if we just get caught up and set in our ways and or what it is, but I love that you're really encouraging kids to really step up and they don't have to wait to be adults to be
Absolutely.
leaders. And in a lot of ways of they end up leaving their parents and their teachers because, you know, they're still idealistic. They haven't gotten disappointed by the world that many times. So I love that you're encouraging them to do
Yes.
that. I just wanted to switch gears a little bit to go back to talking about Sandfish Publishing, because I think that's really wonderful. You have this because in addition to what you're doing publishing children's books, you also have Sandfish Publishing that works with and supports other authors and illustrators from underrepresented backgrounds to create diverse children's literature. Why was this so important to you, and why do you think we still have this need for more own voices children's
Yeah,
literature?
so
And why is
yes.
that?
So when I started my first book, I was actually looking up traditional publishing houses that I could potentially shop the story around and perhaps, you know, have someone pick it up or whatever. But what I discovered is that, and it just came across some articles that were talking about the lack of diversity in these traditional publishing houses and what exactly was happening in children's books, children's literature when it comes to diversity and publishing diverse books. And so I kind of dug deep into it and I was like, oh, okay, this is problems. This is a problem. This is problematic. So what I discovered is that one, a lot of publishing houses do not have a lot of diverse staff. So they don't have a lot of
Yes.
stories uh, that represent people of diverse backgrounds. Not only that, but a lot of the stories that are diverse or, you know, picture books or whatnot that are considered diverse are often done by authors that are not of color or multicultural backgrounds. And a lot of the time, the stories are
Yes.
not accurate in representing the characters and the stories. So they lack authenticity, and that is problematic because when children that are one of these backgrounds look at these stories or read these stories and look at these pictures or whatnot, they start to believe, well, is something wrong with me? Am I supposed to be this? It
Right.
doesn't seem real.
Right.
They probably will not take in the story as much because they don't believe it. It doesn't relate to them. Also,
Mm-hmm.
it leads, you know, those that are not diverse backgrounds or multicultural backgrounds to say, oh, well, this person or this type of person is just like me. They don't really have many differences. And I think that's a problem. You can't just
Right.
ignore the differences that we have because that's not diversity. It's not to ignore what makes us different is what makes it
Mm-hmm.
difficult for us to learn to live with each other and grow with each other and be exposed to the beautiful differences that we have as humans. We are so eclectic, we're so unique in so many ways. It is doing us a disservice as people, as the
Mm-hmm.
human race and humanity to totally ignore these wonderful things that make
Mm-hmm.
us so unique and beautiful as a species. So yeah, and I was just getting into the statistics about it, and I was really flabbergasted. For instance, I'm just looking at the statistics now that have been calculated by the CCBC, which make sure I'm saying their name correctly, is the Cooperative Children's Book Center from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They have been collecting statistics, data about children's books since the 1980s. And they do it every single year. Usually they
Mm-hmm.
provide an infographic, but I don't think they have one for this year because of the pandemic. But they've been collecting data every single year. And with that data, for instance, 2021, just last year, they received 3,415 books. They discovered for ones that included African or Black character, 450 of them, but by African or Black authors, it was 313. And that's actually that's okay
Mm-hmm.
compared to years prior to that.
Better than
So it's getting a tiny bit
it.
better, but it's still a problem, right? And it's same thing with Indigenous, Asian, Latinx, not the the statistics are a little smaller, the numbers are a little smaller because it's very, very culturally specific with those groups, but it's still a problem. So what I realize is that as an author, I think it's extremely important to create books that are authentic to the characters and to the stories. And the best way for that to occur is to have people that are of those backgrounds and can actually create those stories. And they're out there. It's just they don't get an opportunity, to be honest. It's mostly like, oh, I have a story. And so that's why so many people of ethnic backgrounds or that are BIPOC self-publish, because that's the only way to really get their story and for it to be picked up and seen as something that's worthy of publishing by traditional publishing houses. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. But, and you know, self-publishing has been expanded in so many ways. It's so amazing to do self-publishing now. But that's kind of like the only choice for people of color, because it's just not understood and seen as something that's, you know, marketable by traditional publishing houses that are run by mostly people that are not BIPOC or white, to be specific.
Right. I mean, as far as actually, like you say, seeing a book is marketable, but then when you're actually working with an editor who maybe doesn't get the story or doesn't really fully understand the issues, you know, then it might be kind of a creative struggle about how the final product is going to be. Well, I love that you're doing that. And I just, I want to wrap up because we're getting a little close on time, but I do want to hear about what you're working on now. Is there going to be another book in the Daffodil series, or do you have something else you're working on?
Yes, so I'm working on something that focuses again on leadership. I wanted to focus more on girls in leadership, or those that identify as non-binary. So I feel like this was something that needed to be addressed because we are lacking in female leadership around the world, and so many of our rights as, you know, girls, as women, are being stripped away. We're just going, like, it seemed like we were progressing, and then now it's ripping right back into 50 years or 100 years, who knows. So I felt like there's a need to address this, and the best way to do this is to encourage girls to continue to fight for the rights, or just in general demonstrate leadership in the ways that they feel is necessary to change the world. So I'm focusing on actual girls that are doing that today. So we have like Greta, some of them are no longer girls, they're women, but they are individuals that have demonstrated in leaderships and have changed the world in our modern day world, you know, and are doing it even today, that are, you know, lesser known within the US and other areas of the world. So that's the book that I'm focusing on right now. The title is Girls Can Lead, so please do look out for that. So because it's literally ready to go almost. It's almost out the door. So it's going to be published pretty soon. I also, yes.
Oh, so
yeah, I'm definitely hoping for this year. We had a little setback for a little bit, but it looks like something that can be done within this year. And so we're pushing for that. But I would say definitely look out for it, because it's just a matter of time when I'll finally get to be like, hey, and I will definitely be posting it everywhere. So look out for that. Also, if you can, sign up on my newsletter. I definitely give updates about my books and events that I'll be doing and things like that. And I'm very, very consistent with my blog, not with my blog, but with my newsletter. So, and some of my blogs too. So it will be in my blogs as well. And yes, Daffodil Gray, I will definitely be continuing the series. There are 54 articles in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So I have a lot of articles that I need to go after. So I'll at least be hitting the ones that I think are the most applicable, because a lot of the rights are focused on children, but then there's some rights that are focused on what governments and adults can do to ensure these rights. So I won't focus too much on that, but I'll focus on what the rights of children are. So I have a lot of articles to hit. So I will be continuing the series, definitely.
Well, it's good for us to have a lot of good books to look
Thank
forward
you.
to. Thank you so much for joining us. It was
Absolutely. Thank you, Liam. Thank you for inviting me again.
To build an equal world for you and